Hi, this is Ira Gorlick, and this is part three of my spontaneous order lectures. This is a bit on the history. It's not that necessary from an economic standpoint, but I just found it interesting, so I thought I'd include it. So I've included some history here where Murray Rothbard found from China an interesting reference that the writing was that there has been such a thing as letting mankind alone. There has never been such a thing as governing mankind with success. So what we're saying is that even back in very early days of mankind's thinking, we recognize that governing mankind is very difficult. He articulated an early form of spontaneous order, inserting that good order results spontaneously when things are let alone, a concept later developed particularly in the 19th century. The idea of spontaneous order, for example, an order which emerges as a result of voluntary activities of individuals and not one which is created by a government, is a key idea in the classical liberal and free market tradition. This thinking is closely associated with a number of figures who wrote during the 18th century, and particularly a group of writers associated with the Scottish Enlightenment, Mandeville, Hume, Ferguson, and Smith. Adam Smith in The Wealth of Nations is famous for encapsulating the idea of spontaneous order in the phrase the invisible hand, which suggests an ordering principle which lies beyond the activities of many individuals buying and selling in a marketplace. Adam Smith said, by pursuing his own interests, he frequently promotes that of a society more effectively than when he really intends to promote it. Adam Ferguson, in his essay on the history of civil society, used the phrase, later taken up by Hayek, the result of human action, not the execution of any human design. And just go back to my example of people driving or walking in the street and not crashing into each other. In the 19th century, the idea was pursued in France and Herbert Spencer in England. Later in the 19th century, in the Austrian School of Economics, made the idea central to the reformation of economic theory after 1871. Menger, Ludwig von Mises, and Friedrich Hayek are key figures in this development. And of course, you know I've talked a lot about Hayek in this class. So the internet is not spontaneously ordered. The internet works on standards developed through decades of trial and error. And that's important. When we work on the internet, there's a lot of standards, TCP/IP, that affect how we do it. It's not just happens. It doesn't just happen. I'll devote a lot of time to this because it's important in the net neutrality discussion, in the question of how much authority is necessary to optimize the performance of the internet. Can't it optimize itself? Language development is often used as a great example. Apparently, kids learn to understand and speak everywhere without the government. It just seems to happen. But is that really spontaneous order? And in fact, that's one of the big, if you read a lot of the spontaneous order literature, especially coming out of the Mises Institute or the Cato Institute, you'll see language often reflected. But I'm not convinced language is a good example of spontaneous order. The Austrian School of Economics, which we will talk about later when I talk about the economic schools of thought, led by Ludwig von Mises and Friedrich Hayek, has spontaneous order as a key element to optimal market functioning, which is why I spend so much time on spontaneous order, because this is a key element to this classical libertarian, conservative thinking. As I use it here, spontaneous order is typically used to describe the emergence of various kinds of social orders from a combination of self-interested individuals who are not intentionally trying to create order through planning. In economics and the social scientists, spontaneous order is defined as the result of human actions, not human designs, as I pointed out earlier. Hayek said, although there was a time when men believed that even language and morals had been invented by some genius of the past, everybody recognizes now that they are the outcome of a process of evolution, which results in whose results nobody foresaw or designed. And this is critical. And I like this quote, and it's certainly something we need to discuss more. A further quote, if indignant reformers still complain about the chaos of economic affairs, insulating a complete absence of order, this is partly because they cannot conceive of an order which is not deliberately made, and partly because to them an order means something aiming at concrete purposes. Now, this is very critical, and I'm going to talk more about this as we go forward. The reason spontaneous order is attracted to limited government promoters is obvious. If people spontaneously order themselves, we don't need government. But many of the same people that want limited government are also firmly committed to a religious worldview. They don't want the government telling them they cannot pray in public, but they're okay with the church telling them that they should pray in public. They don't want the government telling them what to do, but they're okay with the church telling them what to do. And this is my biggest concern, is that, we talk about those that are limited government types and using spontaneous order, but yet limited government is the same as limited church. I mean, government and church are the same. Now, I think the big argument people will make is that church is voluntary and government is not voluntary. But I think even that's a very subtle, and I'm not sure from this point of view, accurate, because what we're saying is whether it's voluntary or not, the idea that spontaneous order is better than constructed order, yet people, whether it's voluntary enough, are saying that constructed order is just fine, being those that follow the church. So where does God fit into spontaneous order? For Christians like Judge Roy Moore, who's the Supreme Court judge in Alabama, if our laws come from God, then is there only one way to order, God's way? And if so, how does one know what is God's way? Are Muslims not following spontaneous order? So you see what I'm saying? This for me is important. It's not really economic, and maybe I'll get into more when I talk about politics and the law, but I find this an interesting point, and I'd be very interested in hearing from the class as to what they think. And I'm looking for some disagreement here. If you disagree with either what I'm saying or maybe I missed something and getting something wrong. The whole institution grows from the bottom up with spontaneous order. This spontaneous order, Hayek argued, is a dynamic discovery process in which people can experiment with new social mores and new laws, just as they might with new technologies. As he put it in the Constitution of Liberty, the existence of individuals and groups simultaneously observing partially different rules provides the opportunity for the selection of more effective ones. But see, the key here, going back to sort of the Christian view here, or some Christian view, is that it's not relative. See, this implies that these rules are relative. If you believe that the rules are set in stone, they're natural laws, and they're given in the Bible, then this doesn't really fit, which is why I am so confused with conservatives who are also very fundamentalist religious, who support spontaneous order for economics, but then do they support it for other things? So my next lecture is going to be more on spontaneous order and constructed order, and sort of look at the two different ones. Thank you.